Wonder Girls going to the US. It was a big gamble for JYP, yet he would roll the dice and send them overseas back in 2009. This is the story of JYP sending the Wonder Girls to the US that fateful year. So first, let's go back to the year 2007 and set the stage for that fateful 2009 decision 2 years later. Back in 2007, JYP hit it big with his new group, the Wonder Girls. They were the new big girl group, the first popular K-pop female group in a long time. The lineup originally consisting of Yeon, Sunmi, Sohee, Sunye, and Hyuna, the group looked to be a powerhouse in the foreseeable future. Yet Hyuna left the group shortly after and would be replaced by Yubin. Hyuna would later join the group for a minute, while Yubin would be a mainstay in the Wonder Girls, as Yubin would replace the future 4-minute stars rapping for one of their upcoming songs, and that song would be called Tell Me, a huge hit that became popular throughout all of Korea. The video had a funny vibe, it had catchy beats, had a slick rap line by Yubin, and it was just a funny music video. Tell Me had all the ingredients to become a smash hit, and smash hit did it become. Tell Me soon caught on, but it wasn't just the song that became popular. The Tell Me dance became so well known in that there were a lot of choreographed dances and people doing it, a trend that we see today a lot in the West with K-pop dance groups. This phenomenon was called the Tell Me syndrome. The song was later covered by another group during this time, called Girls' Generation just a year later. In the 2010s, future female groups Sistar, AOA, and Twice would cover this song as well. The song's catchy style would set the tone for future K-pop that we would see in 2008 as well as in the 2010s era. The following year, in 2008, the group would release two other smash hits, So Hot and Nobody. Both songs topped various music charts, and Nobody became perhaps the most iconic Wonder Girls song. It sparked a huge dance craze like Tell Me, and it would lead the group winning the Song of the Year award, the Best Music Video for Nobody, and the Best Female Group all that year. In just 2 years, the Wonder Girls was the premier female group in Korea, the nation's girl group. During this time, K-pop started making inroads into the US. Former JYP artist Rain would have a friendly rivalry with Stephen Colbert. They would compete for the top spot in Time magazine's top 100 most influential people in the world. The two would settle their differences in their rivalry with the best way possible, a fight to the death playing Dance Dance Revolution. Rain would also have solo concerts in the US and were well received. SM Entertainment singer Boa would also release a music video called Eat You Up in 2008, an introduction to Western audiences to the highly successful Asian singer and dancer. While this was happening, JYP was also busy, scouting the US in 2008. Both he, as well as the Wonder Girls, would tour the US and film the music video for Wishing on a Star in New York. This would set up for one of the biggest decisions in K-pop history the following year. 2009. The year that K-pop exploded to the world and known to many as the start of K-pop's golden age. JYP and the Wonder Girls were in the driver's seat in K-pop, a powerhouse company within the big three with the biggest female group in the country at the time. JYP would ultimately roll the dice with this biggest group and send them to the US, making them the most popular K-pop group that would focus in the West at the time. He wanted a piece of cracking the enticing US market and making his label among the first to make K-pop huge in the West. To support this, he would open up a JYP headquarters in New York. He would open up a Korean barbecue restaurant called Christabelli near New York's Koreatown 2 years later in 2011, and he would sink a lot of the company's resources, time, energy, and money into the Wonder Girls invasion into the US. In March 2009, JYP announced that the Wonder Girls would release English versions of Tell Me and Nobody. Then the biggest news of all dropped, that the Wonder Girls would leave Korea and team up with the Jonas Brothers and tour with them for 45 concerts in the US as the opening act. The idea was that since the Jonas Brothers were popular in the West, by having the Wonder Girls open up for them, this would give JYP's group a lot of exposure and limelight to Jonas Brothers fans. This in turn would get more US fans to check out the Wonder Girls, and they would dominate the US market as Korea's premier female K-pop group. Or so, that was the plan. In early 2010, just a year into their US tour, there would be already a shakeup within the group. On January 22nd, Sunmi would leave the group and JYP trainee Harim would be promoted to Wonder Girls member and would take Sunmi's place. Sunmi leaving the group would throw the group's schedule and scrap their upcoming tour a month later in February 2010. And while they eventually do a tour 2 months later in April, the signs that the Wonder Girls would face an uphill struggle cracking the US market was already apparent. Nonetheless, they would continue their US push as they came out with the music video 2 different tiers in 3 languages: Chinese, Korean, and English. They would team up with Korean-American comedian Bobby Lee and go back to Korea to promote 2 different tiers. 2011 and 2012 would continue the Wonder Girls' US activities as they would team up with Nick Cannon for a Wonder Girls movie called The Wonder Girls and collaborated with Akon on Like Money. It wasn't known to the group at the time, but Like Money would be the group's last English album as a whole group before going back to Korea. In 2012, they would finally come back to Korea for good and make their Korean comeback with Like This. It's been about 3 years since JYP and the Wonder Girls would end focusing on the US. By the time they came back to Korea, things have changed. For one, there was a lot more K-pop competition back at home. The Korean golden age during the early 2010s was in full swing. The third generation of K-pop stars from 2010 on birthed many great female artists. Female groups such as 4 Minute, Sistar, FX, 21, Miss A, and Girls' Generation would represent this new era. 2012 marked the biggest viral music video on YouTube at the time, Gangnam Style. Because of all this, the Wonder Girls were no longer the queens of K-pop in 2012 as they were back in 2009. That title would belong to SM Entertainment's Girls' Generation, a group that exploded in 2009 with G and has dominated the K-pop charts since the Wonder Girls' departure. Things have also changed within the group by late 2012. One of the members, Sunye, would get married, start a family, and leave the group altogether by moving to Canada to be with her new husband. Sohee would also leave the group, wanting to concentrate on an acting career. And Yeon, while she would still stay with the group, she would go solo in 2014 under the pseudonym Hatfelt. In the following 2 years, the group would go on hiatus, and despite a 2015 reboot of the group turning into a band, the group would never recapture its past glory. Wonder Girls failed to capture a portion of the US market, and despite their best attempts, were overshadowed in the West, ironically, by other K-pop groups performing back in Korea. Did JYP's gamble fail with sending the Wonder Girls to the US back in 2009? It would be so, as one of the biggest telling signs of whether or not JYP and the Wonder Girls' 3-year US experiment worked happened in 2013. JYP would soon close his New York offices and shut down many of his US holdings and businesses. Before closing his New York doors, JYP was losing about $1.5 million each year. JYP would leave the enticing US market and retreat back to Asia. Ultimately, JYP's gamble didn't pay off in the end. The Wonder Girls' prime years were used in the US. So what went wrong? How did JYP's big gamble fail despite some signs of K-pop seeping into the West? There are several reasons, with the first being the West was not ready for K-pop just then. During the late 2000s, JYP predicted that the West would be open to K-pop, that K-pop's slick dance moves, catchy beats influenced by the West, and good-looking idols would catch on, similar to how boy and girl groups in the West were popular during the 90s. Rain and Boa's earlier 2008 foray into the US market were the signs he needed to gamble on the Wonder Girls breaking through. Yet, those 2 singers' exposure wasn't enough to ensure a US breakthrough, as JYP overshot and thought that Americans back in 2009 wanted K-pop and would instantly embrace the genre. That was not the case. Which leads up to the first mishap that JYP did, that he rushed to make K-pop popular in the US, an audience that was still warming up to Asian music, where the vast majority of the American audience had some semblance of other Asian pop culture, such as Japan and China's, yet very few of them knew Korean pop culture, let alone K-pop, back in 2009. Korean pop culture still needed time to grow in the US. Pop culture history shows that things should grow organically. It should grow through fans and word of mouth. That through fans' word of mouth, pop culture will tend to grow and stick around. One example that grew organically within the US is K-pop sensation BTS, where millions of their fans, also known as ARMY, made it possible to crack the vaunted US market that JYP had dreamed of breaking through a decade earlier. It was not Big Hit Entertainment, BTS's parent company, or their label's money that made it possible for BTS to become wildly successful. Rather, their growth was organic, and it felt like BTS's popularity in the West happened naturally. As mentioned earlier, the US and the West, back in 2009, were not ready for K-pop to become mainstream and be covered by large media. The second big mishap was to overly focus on the US market when there was still little demand from the mainstream. While JYP's efforts and hard work should be applauded, waiting for huge demand from the American audience would have been a better move. The saying, "Only go to places where you're wanted," rings true here. With a lukewarm market where many Americans were still adjusting to K-pop, the better bet would have been to stay in Asia, where K-pop was already accepted and loved. Then have American fans, companies, and media come knocking on your door in Korea. Only then would you come out to the US. So the aftermath, what JYP learned. Since the Wonder Girls' foray into the US, JYP has become a much wiser CEO. He would make sure not to repeat the same mistakes with this new female-prized group, TWICE. Instead, he would focus in Korea and Japan at first, since the group has a mix of Korean, Japanese, and a Taiwanese member. It was only when millions of TWICE fans, known as onces, international media, and companies that called JYP and wanted the group to come out west did he allow them to tour outside Asia, as they now toured the US in 2019. TWICE is also helped by K-pop's immense popularity and acceptance in the world today. From 2009 to 2019, K-pop has had a lot of time to grow, as international fan base also grew alongside it. So while JYP's gamble to send the Wonder Girls to the US for 3 years didn't work out in the end, his gamble showed just how hard it is to make the right moves in business. So thank you for watching this video, and if you like what we do here at Pop Story, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. And of course, if you want real talk on K-pop, then please sign up for my free email list below. And until next time, we'll see you in the next video.